I'm gonna have a difficult day at work tomorrow, which for you will be 2 or 3 days ago, if you're watching the video on the day of its release, that is. Or in the past, if it's even later. Point is, tough times are ahead for me, and despite that, I've prepared 10 unusual and little known DOS games for you. Let's check them out together. Quadrax is a side-view puzzle platformer. On the first glance it looks like nothing, cause while neat and clean, the graphics are not impressive for the time it released in, and neither are sounds or music. Which, while not bad, they're not anything great in particular either. But where Quadrax shines like a homeless hairless dog's balls is its gameplay. It's a game that's, at least when talking about its objectives, incredibly simple. You have 2 characters, let's call them red and blue, and you have to get both to the clearly marked exit. Simple stuff really. Only that it's not. Cause other than the first few stages, Quadrax gets challenging real fast and throws logical problems at you at an astonishing pace, which in a game like that, I'd like to add, is good. Cause despite being difficult, it's not unfair and each level has a clear solution. And if you fail, it's your fault and your fault only. So, to complete the game, you're gonna have to switch between the 2 characters, pushing rocks, opening doors, switching levers, using teleports, and so on and so on and so on. All to make sure that both reach to the exit unscathed. And it's not as easy as it may seem, cause death is everywhere, behind every corner really, or under every platform I should say. And while there's no time limit for each of the stages per se, you have to make sure that neither red or blue falls from height, gets crushed by a rock, or stuck behind badly attempted puzzle. And that's just scratching the surface. It's a game of wits, and you'll have to give it your best to complete it. Quadrax features 100 levels, most of which are a puzzling nightmare in a good way, and unlike most other games in today's video, it's actually freeware today that can be downloaded from developers' website. So if you like games like Lemmings, Fury of the Fairies, Lost in Mine or Benefactor, Quadrax is a natural next to add to your collection. Rally-K is that simple in its design. No, really. It could be described in 2 sentences, and with the video running in the background you'd get what it's all about in literally 20 seconds. Or less. But I'll do you a solid and we'll milk it for a minute or so. So, Rally-K is based on arcade original called Rally X. Yep, the designers were masterminds of naming, and it's a top-down escape the maze type of a racer. You swoop around the maze collecting flags because someone once said fun with flags and you took it to heart, and when you grab them all, you get to move to the next stage. Rinse and repeat. It's not that simple though, because Rally-K effectively is an odd sharer Pac-Man clone. Cause while you collect those flags, there are ghosts, Inky, Pinky, excuse me, I meant other cars chasing you, and they want nothing more than to crash your beautiful machine. There are also rocks and trees that you have to avoid, but if you have a driver's license in real life, then you know that already, cause they do the same thing they would have in real life if you drove into them. Now, if that wasn't enough, there's also limited fuel. And we just love car games with limited fuel, right? When it runs out, you don't stop, die or anything game ending, however, you just drive much slower, so navigating the maze and avoiding the enemy cars is considerably more challenging. That said, you are not defenseless, as you have your trusty smoke screen, which when deployed catches the enemy cars within and stops them in their tracks. Then they proceed for a couple of seconds to stay in a spot in deliberating confusion, questioning all their life choices up to this point. Rally-K is a really simple game, it looks bland, it sounds terrible, screeching and farting from the PC speaker, but if you like those early arcade titles, you're gonna like it too. Starball is a pinball based on the Atari ST game called Spaceball. It has few interesting ideas, and if you're a die-hard fan of a genre, I can see you taking interest in it. For instance, there's only one huge vertically scrolling table that's divided into 3 smaller ones with sets of flippers on each, and when the ball falls between them, it drops to the table below it until it reaches bottom and then you die. I mean, if you manage to drop the ball there, cause you don't die just like that. Anyway, each of the mini-tables has its own objective towards which you work on it, and they're pretty fun and unique and remind me a little of the score display dot matrix screen minigames in other pinball games. On top of that, there are secret stages that you can unlock and get into for additional points. They're pretty imaginative, feature entirely differently playing game modes, and are a definite highlight of Starball. One of them is incredibly difficult to get to, so that's your achievement to get, for those completionists among you my dear viewers. Graphics, while not bad, are way below games released in 1996 standard, and compared to much older pinballs from 21st century entertainment, they just look dated and rushed. Sounds and music are, and let's leave it at that. Now, I love pinball games. I wouldn't say that I'm a hardcore fan of these, but I have my faiths in most if not all generations of gaming and like to get lost in them from time to time, as they're a perfect choice for a troubled mind. You get to play and enjoy amassing points while having your mind free for the most part to worry about everything, everyone, to create dramatic scenarios and fill you with doubt all at once. Oh wait, that's just me. I'm Batman! Oh, me and Bruce. I mean Bruce and I, you get it. Stillhunt is a side-view sci-fi action shooter not unlike way more well-known and famous Gunstar heroes on Sega Genesis, with an exception that it cannot be played in simultaneous multiplayer, same way the aforementioned classic could. You can play as she or a he, and other than the sprites they don't differ much from one another, and you start with two weapons, fast-shooting machine gun or a rather useless shotgun. Both characters can however pick up additional weapons as they go, 3 for each, and they both have different unique ones, so I suppose that's another thing that they differ in. Interestingly enough, experience points for each of the weapons is tracked separately, and they all can be upgraded several times, raising their damage, range and fire rate. Oh, and as you go through the game, at later stages you'll be able to unlock a new third character that has all his weapons already upgraded. The levels are rather large, and while they mostly consist of running from left to right, they're a bit uneven, meaning the first few do not impress too much, and I could risk saying that they're borderline boring at times, while the latter ones are much better, more fun designed. Can Stillhunt hold a candle to Gunstar heroes though? I think that saying no would not only be fair to Sega's classic, but also correct. So no, it cannot. But it doesn't mean that it's a bad game, cause it's also not. It's just Korean, which is the main factor why it wasn't more popular and haven't reached wider fanbase in the West, I think. Graphics, music and sounds are all excellent, and while they may not be the absolute best PCs could do in 1996, they're all definitely pleasant and well fitting to the gameplay. So, to summarize, if you like shooters and action games, Stillhunt is something definitely worth your time. If you don't, then give it a go anyway, perhaps it's your first. After all, what do you have to lose? Just a few minutes at most. Stalker is a top-down arcade flip-screen racer and also a port from the arcades. You could say that same as earlier mentioned Rally K, it's maze-based in its design, but it plays entirely different and does not take place in a maze per se, but rather its screens when put together form a maze of roads. Anyway, your task is to race from coast to coast, from Florida to California via freeways. It's another game where there's fuel, so that's fun, and given that your full tank lasts you only 90 seconds, every time you find yourself near a gas station, make sure to refuel. As you race along, you'll drive over various different road features like bridges, side roads, country roads, and even off-road to cut corners, so to speak. While you'll meet other racers and will have very limited traffic to deal with, they're hardly a problem. Police, on the other hand, definitely is, and they can issue speeding tickets, collecting certain number of, ends your game. So they are best avoided by any means necessary. Stalker's presentation is quite simple and the gameplay design is also not too creative. But for short bursts, every now and then, when you can't decide what to play next, it's a great little palette cleaner between other, better games. Thexder, which I no doubt mispronounced here terribly, is a futuristic, always scrolling action shooter platformer, in which you play as a huge mech that can instantly switch into a jet and vice versa, whenever necessary gameplay or exploration wise. Thexder's gameplay loop is very simple to explain. There's 16 levels that you have to go through, and you need to annihilate anything and everything that stands in your way, period. No tragic accident that led you to it, no country to save or evil villain to defeat. Nothing. At least nothing I would have known of. It's not an easy game though, and will more often than not put you in a spot where you need to react fast and run or fly away to avoid distraction. And all because of the auto-aim feature. It would be amazing if it worked on the closest to farthest basis, shooting at the closest enemies first and then those far off later. Instead, it targets the topmost one, and when it's killed drops to the one below and so on until all are dead. And since these often come in groups, it's not unusual for those lower to be closer to you than those above. Even worse, the auto-aim does not aim at the enemies below you. It's rather annoying, but not game-breaking in any shape or form, and only adds to the already quite steep difficulty curve. Especially that you're bound to find yourself in a situation where there's literally dozens of enemies on the screen at once, all going straight for you. And it's why it's best that you learn and master kiting fast, so pulling away from a group of enemies as a jet, changing into mech, killing a few, changing back, flying away again, changing once more to shoot, time after time until all are defeated. It may seem like a chore to some, but for me it's a part of the charm of this game. Also, I have a history of playing MMOs, so I'm used to the idea of kiting whenever the tank dies. A bit off topic, but explains why I don't mind the mechanic. I honestly don't know what the story of Thexder is, what's your motivation to kill all those enemies, but it's not something you'll get time to ponder about when playing. What you will though is why there's no ending if you ever beat the game, because after completing the last stage it just restarts from level 2, which given its difficulty is rather disappointing. A short animation and a wall of text would be much better than this. But that's me, perhaps you won't mind. Tipis Adventure is a Korean arcade action platformer. As you probably have guessed, you play as Tipi, a young mighty warrior who's lost his fiancée to the evil red dragon that's ruling the land with brutal and unconquered force. So, naturally, you take it upon yourself to end his reign and kill it. The game is composed out of 6 rather large levels that you have to complete before going for the villain. They are filled with various different bodies, which I must add are more often than not very uniquely designed and fun to dispose of, like a walking headless body. Was there a reason for such an enemy to exist? Perhaps not, but I'm glad that it does, as it's unusual and something different than what we're used to in the Western video games. Since we already somehow landed on the presentation, it's excellent. All the characters, yours and enemies alike, are beautifully designed and animated super smoothly, making Tipis Adventure a pleasure to go through. Bosses are all different and have unique attack patterns and are fun to battle against and even more so to put down. If there's one thing I don't particularly enjoy about how the game looks though, and it's a very minor complaint, not reflecting on the overall quality of the game, it's the shots from some of the wall-mounted traps. They shoot a projectile that looks like a green line a pixel or two in height at most, and it's very difficult to distinguish from the background in this fast-moving game. It's not a big issue as you have a health bar and don't get killed by a single hit only, but it's a little annoying nonetheless. Other than that, the game looks fantastic. Sounds and music are both good too, perhaps not on the same level as the graphics, but definitely not below industry standard for 1997. There are colored doors in the levels, and they obviously require you to find appropriately colored keys to access, so that's your little bit of exploration puzzling too. Perhaps not much, but you'll be having so much fun playing Tipis that you'll hardly notice that it's just a straight-up action platformer and not something bigger and more demanding. There's no saves or passwords, so each playthrough starts from the very beginning of the game. A rather unusual choice for 1997 on a home system, but definitely not something to discourage from playing. If there's one arcade game in this video that deserved to be more well-known and popular than it was, Tipis Adventure is the one. Superhero League of Hoboken is a humorous role-playing adventure hybrid, and one of the weirdest games I've ever seen in this already unusual mix of genres. A very good one, to be clear, and not weird because it's bad, broken or unplayable. Anyway, the northeastern United States is reduced to post-apocalyptic toxic wasteland and your Crimson Tape, an excellent name for a vigilante I must add, a leader of a group of superheroes. I'm Batman. No man-bats in this one, Bruce. Toxic pollution and numerous wars have reduced the US to dangerous badlands filled with mutants and other generic comic book villains, with occasional city-states serving as beacons of hope and civilization in these otherwise wild wastelands. You will have to complete increasingly more difficult missions assigned by the so-called Commissioner to eventually face and defeat evil Dr. Entropy, the main body of the game. Your superhero power is the ability to create organizational charts. Yes, you heard that right. And as you progress through the game, more heroes with equally as hilarious powers will join your team. And some of these are really something else, like the ability to see through pizza boxes, or aura of lethargy and dullness that can instantly put many opponents to sleep, kinda like my voice does. Not to mention fan favorite Iron Tummy, whose uncanny skill allows him to eat any kind of spicy foods without any intestinal distress. I mean, no curries, chilies or ghost peppers can stand in the man's way. He's so cool. You can have up to 9 heroes in your team, and completing missions will reward experience points, which in turn will let you level them up, raising their powers and skills considerably. Overworld traversal takes place in a top-down view, and combat encounters play out in first-person turn-based mode. Superhero League of Hoboken is honestly one of the most original and unique games of the 90s, and all fans of RPGs should do themselves a huge favor and give it a go, cause it's probably one of the best sleeper games that they've never heard of. Trojan is a futuristic side-view flick-screen action beat-em-up. It's also a port from the arcades, for better or worse. In the not-so-far-off future, the world was conquered by the evil warlord Achilles and his henchmen. Yes, like the mythological Achilles. You play as Ryu, same as one from Street Fighter, but you're not unarmed and have a sword and shield to overthrow the evil ruler. So you're actually appropriately armed to the game's post-apocalyptic vision of the future. And while the sword is an important tool in bringing death and destruction to countless generic-looking enemies, it's the shield that's your most useful asset. And using it will not only be a good practice, but also mandatory for survival to be able to complete the game. The 6 levels Trojan's built of all consist of mid and end level bosses, and without the shield, some of the bosses' attacks can one-hit you. so better get used to using it often. If that wasn't enough, you're not only gonna have to master the use of the shield, but also a prompt follow-up attack, as you're also working against a constantly ticking down clock. Trojan is not an easy game, and will definitely take quite a few attempts before you complete it. Luckily, it's actually pretty fun, if you can overlook its presentation today, that is. And I mean both sounds and graphics. And same as in most other Capcom titles, to see the ending, you'll have to complete it twice. Weird choice for the PC game, but whatever, it is what it is. If you don't mind difficult arcade games, Trojan's as good as they come and an easy addition to your DOS collection. But if you do, then best play something else really. Ultimate Disappointment, Ultimate Body Blows is Body Blows and Body Blows Galactic combined in one game and consists of all characters and stages found in the earlier titles. And while it was well known and for whatever unexplainable reason popular title on the Amiga, it's virtually unknown on PC, which is good, cause it's crap. And yes, I hadn't loved the Amiga before I owned a PC, but I don't subscribe to the notion of liking something just because everyone else does. While UBB, which I will call it that for the rest of its on-screen time, is the best version of the game out there, it's still not good whatsoever. But let's start with what it actually is. It's a 2D versus fighting game that for a long time was an Amiga exclusive and also widely and wrongly considered to be the best fighter on the system. It features 22 fighters from both original games, all the stages and music, but most of all the design choices that made the original such a terrible, awful and unplayable title. Namely, everything other than the presentation, which is quite good actually. Both sound and graphics are decent. First is appropriately oomphy, especially with a very enjoyable sound clip whenever a character hits the floor. Not very realistic, but feels great to hear it whenever it's not you who's knocked down. And graphics, as you can see, are colorful, detailed and very unique as compared to other games in the genre on PC. Attack animations, however, feel like they could use few extra frames each to be tad smoother. But other than that, there's nothing to complain when it comes to UBB's presentation. Sadly, it's the gameplay where it all falls apart. Unlike Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat or any countless of their clones, UBB gives you one button for controls. Clearly a leftover from Amiga original, but definitely something PC users were not used to. Fortunately, and yes, that's sarcasm, other than the 6 or so standard moves that the characters have, each of them has only one special. Yes, you heard that right. One. Sure, given how every character looks different, their standard attacks are mostly different from one another, but they're all your standard high, mid and low attacks, and a couple more maybe. A single special move is definitely not enough. If that wasn't enough, the balancing is basically non-existent in UBB, some characters are obviously much worse than others, and I can't imagine anyone finding the inner strength to complete this stinker in a single player mode. It's just not fun at all, and it's not worth your time, effort and nerves. In multiplayer, it's tad better, especially if both players don't know any of the fighters and won't pick the best ones each fight, but it hardly ever offers any more than 2-3 encounters worth of entertainment anyway. UBB on PC was hella obscure, and good, cause it's one game that's actually well worth being forgotten. Shame on you, Team 17. How do you like today's selection? I tried showing quite a varied spread of genres today, so that everyone could find something for themselves, so hopefully you did too. Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of the channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.